Yo, what's up, dudes? How's it going? So I am back on with the Kramer Baretta special. And the reason is that I was able to do a few tweaks over the last couple of days that I think really got it working at peak performance. So if you have one, these tips, I guess, are for any guitar, but they especially pertain to the Baretta. So if you bought a Baretta special and you found that the trem was really hard to push, there's really too many springs in it. It ships with 3 springs. They are unneeded for the tension of the strings that are shipped with it. It's shipped with 9s, which is a fairly common, that's probably the most popular. 9s or 10s is probably the most popular gauge. So, you know, especially for a guitar that's supposed to be sort of a shred guitar. I mean, 9s is sort of it. But the springs in the back are just really way too much force. So the easiest way to remedy that is take the back plate off, and you'll see 3 springs in the back of the guitar. Take the middle spring out. The middle spring. Your guitar should be fully tuned up and whatever where you want it to be for tuning. Take that middle spring out. You could use like a little pair of needle nose or something and pull it out at the side that goes into the bridge, and take that spring off and just put it aside. And then do not put the back plate back on yet. Turn the guitar over and look at the bridge and see if the bridge is tilted up. The bridge might be tilted up off the face a little bit. Now, if you want a floating bridge, you could start to try and tune it up from there, and you could sort of work that out as to what you want for tension. I think the easier way, if you just want it to work and you don't want to have to think about a floating bridge, is to flip the guitar on the backside again so that you can see the tremolo springs, and tighten the claw down until it gets to the point where on the front of the guitar, take a half turn and a half turn and look on the front. Is it still floating? Okay, another half turn and another half turn per screw. Turn it around. Is it still floating? And just keep going until it's no longer floating. And once it's to the face of the guitar, you should be fine. And I got mine to get to the face of the guitar long before it got to the body. So you should have plenty of room with the tension of the 2 remaining springs. Again, take the center spring out. You should have plenty of tension left with that remaining spring. 2 springs that are in there to back it all the way back down and have it sort of decked, but a lot easier to work now. Okay, so once you have it so that it's decked, okay, before you call it like the end of it, what I did with mine, is I flipped it back over and I bent a string, give it a good bend, like the G string, and I looked at the bridge and I said, is the bridge really pulling up? Bend another string. And when I look down here, is the bridge really pulling up while I do that? And at first it kind of was. I gave it like another quarter turn per each one, and then that solved that. And then the additional tension at that point of bending the string wasn't enough to pull the bridge forward. And that's kind of the sweet spot. That's where you want to be. You want to have it decked and just enough extra tension so that it doesn't pull forward when you bend the string. And you'll notice that that the bridge is a lot easier to work now than it was when it had the 3 springs in there. No matter how much you adjusted the claw, the springs just had too much tension coiled up in them. There was too much opposing force, and you had to really work it. You're going to bend the bar. You could even break it off inside there. Pull that center spring out. You'll be good to go. And it, again, that applies for any guitar that's suffering from the same thing, that doesn't have a floating bridge. Floating bridges are a whole other ball of wax. All right. The next thing I did after that was I realized that when I used the trem, I was getting, it was sticking in the nut as it normally would. So I lubed that up. I used actually 2 different formulas I have. I have the, what's it called? Graphitol, right? That's been around, I want to say GHS was the distributor of that product. And then I used the D'Addario, guitar lubricant, which is another great product. Sort of like, very much how like nut sauce is delivered. It comes in a needle form, and you use the needle to drop a tiny bit on the right in the groove, and then put the string back in. And the needle works really great for the bridge as well, whereas the other one I tend to put a little bit on a Q-tip and use the Q-tip to apply it. Otherwise, it's too messy. It's much more liquid. The one from D'Addario is more like a Vaseline consistency instead of a much softer, almost like an oil consistency. So that has kept things in tune. Makes a huge difference. I can't stress how much of a difference that makes. The last thing, as far as setting it up, you just got it, and you want to get it sounding as good as you can. I did notice that the pickup, and this was only really obvious to me because I plug into a piece of digital hardware that gives me a meter. And I have plugged countless guitars into that system, and I've looked at that meter and adjusted that gain countless times. And I noticed that it was a real high spike and then a drop way down. And the spike could redline very easily. And it didn't sound right. It didn't sound good. And I have come over the years, that is something that I've seen about a half dozen times prior over the years. And I know exactly what it is. The pickup is too high. And you're so close. You're so close. You're sending out such an amount of voltage. It's like too much. It doesn't sound good, number one. And number two, you're like overdriving the preamp for a split second, and then you're underdriving it. The better way to do it is I back the pickup off so that the front of the pickup is just about the same height as the pickup ring. And because it's at a little bit of a slant, the back is a little bit higher. But I did a little bit of a back off on this until I felt like when I looked at it on my meter, and it's hard, I know you're not going to have it, you probably have an amp or something like that. But I would back it off just a little bit and see if it's sounding a little better to you. And I don't mean huge steps here. I'm talking like down just a little bit, a little half a turn on one side, a little half a turn on the other. See how it's feeling. And I could tell immediately, because what happens is I get rid of the spikes, and then I can raise the amp up, and it's much more even. Sounds much better. No, the spikes aren't there. So much better. All right, so just back that pickup off if you feel like you're getting, when you really, again, not when you hit it soft, it's when you really dig in, almost like an unwanted spike at the very beginning. And then just back that pickup off just a hair. The one last thing I can tell you that I did to this, and this is at your own risk, it's up to you, but I have a very small wrench that fits perfectly on these little the little nuts that hold the, let me get to this little camera here, right down here, that hold these pegs in, right? And I find that sometimes if these feel like a little loose, maybe 2 out of 6, it's just a tiny bit loose, and I have a small wrench, and I just very carefully say, is this snug? And I don't mean tight, I mean just snug. And if it's a little loose at all and it moves a little bit, I just move it until it's snug. And I just make sure that these are snug and down. I cannot tell you how much of a difference that will make. Because when they put these in, they don't want to tighten them down and break anything, so they don't really... A lot of times these can get a little bit loose, especially if you're, whining a lot. For whatever reason, the nuts on the top here get a little loose. What you don't want to do is over-tighten them. What you don't want to do is crank those down. But if there's any little bit of play in there, I think 2 of the 6 had a tiny, everything went up, snug, a little bit of play. Snug, up, a little bit of play. And boom, and I mean like a 1/10 of a turn, right? But just that last little mile to get it tight. And I'm telling you, the stability... is like through the roof. All right? Hey, just one more thing before we wrap this video up. You should remove the resistor on the volume knob in this guitar. I want to thank Wicked Fester, which I'm assuming is a play on Wicked Lester, for pointing that out. The resistor that they use on the volume pot does more harm than good. It's supposed to be their version of like a treble bleed, but it really made the guitar sound kind of boxy when you rolled the volume off. Now, when I roll the volume off, it's got wonderful bass and noticeable tone improvement. So I just grabbed a little set of snips and just snipped it out. It doesn't matter if you leave the tang on it. You don't have to get a soldering iron out or anything. Just get a little set of snips and go in there and just snip off one leg and then snip off the other leg and use a pair of tweezers and take out the resistor and throw it in the trash, because I think it sounds better with it out. All right, there you go. Again, that's only for the for this guitar. That's not, if you have another brand, I'd have to check it out. But if you have one of these, if you have a Kramer Baretta, if you have a Kramer Baretta special, pull that resistor off the volume knob. It really does. It makes it... It totally makes it sound better. And there you go. All right, dudes. As always, thanks so much for hanging out. Rock on.